Cam Ward is looking like the pick for the Titans, but how does he fit into Brian Callahan's offense? Or better yet, how can Brian Callahan fit his offense to Cam Ward? We're going to dive into that subject today. This is the Music City Audible. Let's get to it. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Music City Audible podcast presented by Broadway Sports Media in partnership with 440 Sports. I'm Justin Graver. With me, as always, Justin Melo. Remember to hit that like, subscribe, drop a comment below. Justin, how is it going today? Before I let you answer, I just want to say, we dropped that pod yesterday with Ted Wynn, talking about Cam Ward's superpower, talking about Shedeur Sanders and his pro day. We recorded that on Tuesday afternoon. We drop it Wednesday morning. Literally right before or after we drop it, Easton Freeze reports this big news that Amy Adams-Strunk was at Cam Ward's private workout, and his article title is basically, "The Plan is Cam." Adam Schefter said something similar late on Tuesday night, that the plan for the Titans is Cam. Have we reached the stage of the draft cycle where we finally maybe know 99.9% sure that the Titans are indeed, like everything we've been saying for weeks is coming to be true?
Yeah, I think so. And again, I think it's been fairly easy throughout this process to connect the dots, right? Like I think I said this on the last episode, but they've literally done everything with them that they could possibly do, right? They had the combine formal. They brought him in for his pre-draft 30 visit as early as they could. Like, they brought him in before free agency opened, which was really early in the pre-draft, visit process. Then they went again. They've sent everyone to the pro day, and then they had the private workout days later, where Amy Adams-Strunk joins them via the private jet. I mean, I don't remember. I'm very forgetful for stuff like that, but I don't remember the last time I heard about an owner taking the private jet to like a private workout. Like, I don't think that's overly common. So, and they're still going to have Zoom meetings with him over these next couple of weeks. Because remember, you do those with draft prospects too, and there's no limit on those. So they're still going to have him in for virtually on Zoom. So they've done everything they could. I mean, there's no doubt about it at this point that it's going to be Cam Ward at number one. I would be beyond something. I'd bet the damn house on it being Cam Ward at number one.
Yeah, me too. And that's why I think we can start shifting our focus over what are the Titans going to do at the top of the draft to, once they do it, how does that affect the team and how can they get the most out of Cam Ward? And we could save these conversations for April 24th and beyond, but why? Wait, let's do it now. And, as we get closer to the draft, we'll start talking about what else the Titans can do in rounds 2 through 7. But for now, let's focus on Cam Ward, because Brian Callahan in Florida at the owners' meetings earlier this week went on This Is Football podcast hosted by Kevin Clark. Tremendous interview. If you haven't watched it, go find it on YouTube. Highly recommend it. But I'm going to play a clip from it now because, number one, I saw this before Easton Freeze reported that it is Cam Ward, essentially. And it made me think, oh, it's Cam Ward. So I'm going to play it for that reason, but also because I think it's a great segue into the how can the Titans offense fit what Cam Ward does best. Here is Brian Callahan.
I actually went back and watched because it was COVID, so we had all this Zoom time, and we recorded all of them. Oh, and so I went back and watched all of those first handful of meetings, just to more for perspective on I see Joe as I saw him when I left, which is this, top of the league, best quarterback in football, arguably. Rich as hell. Very, very wealthy now. But I went back and watched all of those just to see where he was in that process. And it was good for me to see, because you don't remember that sometimes, on the amount of work that it took to get to where he was. And a lot of that's a credit to Joe, but there was definitely things that we did developmentally, both in how we taught the scheme, how we introduced it, what we asked of him, how we structured game plans that first year. Those are all things that I've sort of revisited just to have some perspective on what it looks like.
So you wrote an article for Titan Size sort of about this on Thursday morning, and you mentioned that in this interview, Callahan goes on to say that he wanted to make Joe Burrow's rookie year in the NFL feel like year 3 at LSU. Those were the words Callahan used. And what does that mean exactly? That means you're not bringing in a rookie quarterback and installing a whole new language and a whole new scheme of a bunch of stuff that he's unfamiliar with just because that's what you run as a coach or as a team. You work to get the most out of this quarterback to ease his transition. And Callahan went on to say, we start with the concepts that he knows best. And throughout the course of a season and the course of a few seasons, we continue to add on and teach him how to read new things and how to work new concepts that he's not as familiar with. So I want to talk about that, but I also want to point out that like Brian Callahan would not be going back to 2020 recorded meetings with prospect Joe Burrow before they even draft him unless he's looking for something that's like, I see some Cam Ward in here, or we just met with Cam Ward at the Combine. You know, that made me think of my meetings with Joe Burrow. I want to go watch some of those and see if those similarities are really there. And doing all this work to remind himself how they transitioned Burrow to the pros, he's not doing that for no reason. It's not just for a reference point. It's because they're preparing to draft Cam Ward.
I fully agree, and I wanted to add that last point. I don't think it's necessarily because, he reminds me of. It's more about refamiliarizing himself with the process of preparing to inherit and teach a rookie quarterback and get him ready to play in the NFL. And in the article for Titan Sized, I wrote that makes, the truth is it makes Brian Callahan a great candidate to be overseeing this process. Now, I don't want to get side quested, but like, every time I hear Brian Callahan speak, I have such a hard time squaring away that version of Brian Callahan, who I always really like, with the version who coached an awful football team in 2024. It's just the truth, right? Because like, I thought in 2024, they always looked unprepared and they never came out firing hot. They came out down 28-0 in the first quarter. Like, I always have a hard time squaring that away. That's an internal battle I'm still fighting, because every time I watch him speak, I really like him. I think he's incredibly qualified for the job. I think he's incredibly qualified to have a quarterback that gets drafted number 1 overall. And certainly, he would not be refamiliarizing himself with this, 2020 recorded Zoom videos if it's not like, hey, I'm about to go through this process all over again where I've got a quarterback at my disposal that I drafted number 1. It obviously went really well with Joe Burrow. Let me, figure out remember some of the things we did with him. And look, it's going to be different, right? But I think the most important thing is learning the comfort zone, how he himself, Callahan, that is, managed to adapt to what Joe Burrow knew and was comfortable with, and how, like, even though the concepts might be different, the offense is going to be different, how I can take that experience, apply it to Cam Ward, and make sure I'm doing the same thing.
Exactly. So while we talk about Cam Ward's fit with the Titans, I think it is a useless conversation to say Brian Callahan likes to do this, and how does Cam Ward fit that? Because that's not what Brian Callahan's going to do. He's going to do what he did with Joe Burrow. He just told us he's going to do the same thing he did with Joe Burrow, which doesn't mean install the same offense he installed with Joe Burrow, like you just said. He's going to look at what Cam Ward did best at Miami, and what does that mean for us? So that's going to be a lot of RPO action, similar to what Cliff Kingsbury just did with Jaden Daniels in Washington this past season. Jaden Daniels ran a lot of RPO stuff at LSU his last 2 seasons there, especially the last season, had a ton of success with it. So they bring that to his NFL offense, again, to ease the transition so that there are as few plays as possible where Cam Ward's walking up after breaking the huddle to the line of scrimmage thinking, okay, so on this one I got to do, okay, I'm not as familiar. Like, you want to eliminate as much of that as you can so that he gets to the line of scrimmage comfortable, can point out things in the deep, see exactly what he needs to see, and have a solution ready when the ball is snapped based on whatever look he's about to get, giving him things that he's done a million times and not for the first time in training camp a few weeks ago.
And please correct me if I'm wrong, because I have a feeling you'll remember this better than I do. But when they first hired Brian Callahan, I remember thinking and seeing examples of this where all of us did the same thing. Myself, you, Mike Herndon, Zach, like, you start to go study the Brian Callahan offense in Cincinnati, and we knew this time last year, again, when we were just, familiarizing ourselves with Callahan's offense, we knew that they changed that offense drastically in the beginning to fit Joe Burrow. Like, we all thought Brian Callahan and Zach Taylor, what are they? Students of the West Coast offense, right? We know that his dad, Bill Callahan, was one of the mentors of that West Coast offense, essentially, one of the godfathers, if you will. And we knew Zach Taylor came from like the Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, which derives, again, from the original mentors of the West Coast offense. But that first year Bengals offense under Joe Burrow was not really a West Coast offense, because that's not what Burrow ran at LSU. This is where I'm saying, correct me if I'm wrong. I think I'm going back, 2020? It was a lot of like spread shotgun, like you said, spread RPO, wasn't a whole lot under center, if I recall correctly. Burrow doesn't love throwing the ball play action under center, which was what the Titans did a lot in that zone-based offense in the beginning, right? That's not what Burrow liked. And Zach Taylor and Brian Callahan, they changed that offense drastically in 2020 to fit with Joe Burrow. So if you want to know what the Titans offense looks like in 25, you better start familiarizing yourself with what Cam Ward ran at Miami.
Exactly. So that brings us back to a lot of RPOs, but that can't be the basis of your offense at the NFL level. It just doesn't work like that. So what else is Cam Ward really good at? He's really good and really comfortable ripping it over the middle of the field in breaking routes, seam shots, benders, those types of plays where he can either fit the ball in the hole of the zone, which he's really good at doing. He uses eye manipulation over the middle of the field to get linebackers out of throwing lanes. He positions his own body behind the line of scrimmage well to create throwing lanes, like either moving to the left or the right to create some of those windows for himself. And he's really good against man coverage at throwing with anticipation before a receiver comes out of his break. He did a ton of stuff over the middle of the field. I also thought he was really good on those outbreakers, the short to intermediate outbreakers, throwing from opposite hash to on an outbreaking route right on the money. Those are the types of things that he does really well. So what does that mean for the Titans offense? It means they need a slot receiver like Xavier Restrepo or like Kyle Williams at Washington State, who can get open over the middle of the field, who can run option routes and can be on the same page as Cam Ward, whether it's going to break left or break right over the middle. They need players that can execute in that area of the field, but they also need concepts that put Cam Ward in position to read that area of the field versus things that he doesn't do as well, which would be throwing deep outside the numbers, right? I think most people who've watched his tape would come away that he doesn't have a ton of weaknesses. One of them is sometimes decision-making when a play breaks down he can get a little too aggressive, a little too high on his own abilities, and the deep shots to the outside where his completion rate was not very high. I told you right before we started taping, I thought some of that was due to the ability of the receivers outside, cornerbacks being physical in coverage, and throwing a receiver's timing off a route, and it makes a throw that might have been on the money look like an overthrow because the receiver was slowed down by the defender. So having a better outside playmaker might make him better at throwing the deep ball outside the numbers. But regardless, even on plays where those kind of coverages weren't the case, he did have a tendency to overshoot those, not put enough air under them. So you don't ask him to do that as much, at least in his rookie year as he continues to work on that area of his game. Don't call the adjustment where you see the one-on-one to the outside boundary receiver and just say, it's a go, throw it, and give your guy a chance one-on-one, because that's not where Cam Ward excels. So it's finding that balance, not just implementing the things that he does well, but not asking him to do the things he doesn't do as well.
I love when you and I are flowing like this, because I've got some context I want to add to that. We had an article on Titan Size recently written by Will Lomas, who I give flack to all the time. You know, me and Will go back and forth, even though he writes for me. I give him shit all the time. I thought this was one of his stronger articles, and I thought it was a really good information. He wrote an article and borrowed some charting data sourced from Derek Klassen, who does outstanding quarterback charting work every year, every draft process. And he had, and Lomas wrote that article. I think the headline was Titans got to build their offense around Cam Ward's superpower or something along those lines. And what he kind of laid out in that article was that, again, borrowing that data from Derek, that Cam does a great job. What you just said, throwing those intermediate to deep up the middle of the field, though, right? So think digs, seams, things of that nature. In fact, Klassen had him at a 74.1 completion percentage, a 74.1% accuracy deep down the middle of the field, targeting that exact area you're talking about. And here's another one for you that really blows me away. And once you add the context, you'll appreciate it even more. On tight window throws, his completion percentage to that area was 48.8%. As you know, the middle of the field can start to get really crowded and things of that nature. So if you're going to target that area, you got to be comfortable making those making those tight window throws. 48.8% for Cam Ward in that area. The elite mark is 50%, okay? Now, 48.8 doesn't sound great, but when you factor that elite is 50, he's real close to that mark. Here's the other context for you. That chart's better, higher than Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, or Bo Nix from the year before. A couple of those guys were in the same range. They were in like the 45, 46% margin, but for Cam Ward, it was 48.4, higher than any of those, highly drafted first-round quarterbacks last year, just 1.5% off the elite mark.
Right. And that's where he's also going to excel, is being able to, when his feet are right and when he's not being lazy with his mechanics, when he's not doing some weird hip, like over rotation of the hips because his feet aren't right, he can pinpoint that ball wherever he wants it to go. And it's going to be about being more consistent with his footwork so that he can do that at a higher rate versus just when he feels like it, which sometimes it feels like he just doesn't feel like it or feels like he doesn't need to. Again, he has a little bit of that hubris going on where he is very high on his own ability. And I am as well. But sometimes the mechanics got to be there for that ability to be there. But that's also one of the things that makes him great, is his ability to make those throws when his mechanics aren't working, because if he's under heavy pressure or if he's escaping the pocket or he can't step up, he still has the ability to make those throws. Just it's not as consistent when his footwork's not working. So I don't know how you design an offense around your ability to make tight window throws, but it just helps elevate the potential of any offense because of that ability to make throws even when a receiver is covered, and especially doing it over the middle of the field. The like slant routes on 3rd and 3 type of situations, he can be pinpoint in those areas. And I also think an area that's underrated that he does well, that he didn't do a lot of, is play action from under center with your back to the defense. There's one play that stands out in particular. I can't remember which game this is from, but it's a play action from under center, tight formation, and he turns his back to the defense and hits Elijah Arroyo over the top, wide open. The commentators on this play were comparing him to Peyton Manning's ability to fool defenders with the play action fake. He didn't do it a whole lot because he mostly passed out a shotgun, similar to Joe Burrow at LSU, with Miami and Mario Cristobal, and even going back further than that in the air raid systems he was in before that. But he can sell those play fakes from under center. He can turn his back to the defense. I don't know how comfortable he will be with that right away, but if the Titans want to marry their run game with their pass game, that's the best way to do it. The Kyle Shanahan thing where your pass plays look like run plays and vice versa. And I do think that is something he hasn't done as much, but has shown an ability to execute that I wonder if we'll see Brian Callahan say, hey, you only did this a few times, but were you comfortable with that? Do you want to do that some more? Because we think there's opportunities for big plays if we incorporate more of this stuff.
Well, that's how you would get to expand your playbook and open it up even more. Now, I imagine, I don't want to be a wet blanket, but I think you're going to start real slow with stuff like that because he didn't do it a lot. And I don't think you want to foray into, untraveled territory too quickly, too early. But it's nice to know that he's it was nice to see that he put a couple of those reps on tape. I think that's you mentioned earlier, as you gradually expand as the season goes on, as he shows that he's comfortable with what you've initially given him. If you feel really good about where he's at week 6, week 7, week 8, I think that's where you start including some of those concepts.
And I think one thing they're going to do early on is let him throw the ball. I think that is something that they didn't really do with Will Levis very much, the 20 to 30, under 30 attempts most games, sometimes under 25 attempts at a game. Cam Ward's not used to that. Cam Ward's more in that Joe Burrow mold. And we talked a lot about this when Brian Callahan was hired, but their run pass rates, right? Cincinnati was almost 60% run to about 40%, or almost 60% pass, to about 40% run. Whereas the Titans last year were a lot more run heavy than pass heavy, especially than Brian Callahan has been in his past. And I think a lot of that is because of A, the pass protection was so bad, but B, he couldn't count on his quarterback to drop back 50 times a game and make the right decision 49 out of those 50 times, right? Will Levis would make the right decision 40 out of 50 times. So let's make it 25 times, and then it's 20 out of 25, and there's only 5 bad plays versus 10 bad plays, right? With Cam Ward, he's going to make the right decision the majority of the time, especially in structure. Now, out of structure, maybe once out of 30 times, he'll make a horrible cross-body middle of the field pass that gets intercepted. But that doesn't happen nearly as much as people make it out to be, because those plays go kind of viral on social media when they happen on Saturdays throughout the college football season. But I think to make my point there is that they're going to open games with passing on first downs with, quick throws outside the numbers just to get him in a rhythm, some quick RPO game type stuff. Like, I think the entire game plan from what we saw for the Titans last year will look so much different because they're going to want him to get comfortable and get in a rhythm early. So they're going to give him throws early on first and second down and not make a 3rd and 8 be his first pass attempt of the game.
Keep in mind, like, Will Levis lost Brian Callahan's trust really early, right? Like, in that first game, you're up 17-3 against the Bears or whatever it was. There was no need to throw it a ton in that game. And he lost his trust there with that, terrible pick 6. And then in week 2, he did something stupid in week 2. I already can't remember what it was, but he did something really dumb in week 2 as well. Was it the flip back to the Jets? Yeah, it was the flip back in the red zone that ended up being like a fumble when it was like 3rd and 12, and there was absolutely no need to lateral it on the floor when you were in field goal range. So the point is, Will Levis lost that trust really early, right? So we might not have ever really seen, and then the pass pro, like you said. So we didn't really see what the Callahan offense was probably supposed to look like.
Right. And I don't know that there is a supposed to look like necessarily,
right,
sort of going back to what we're talking about. But what does Callahan love more than anything? I'm sure he has preferences, but I think ultimately his preference is to do what his quarterback does the best, because everybody has to succeed. All 11 guys, it takes all 11 or whatever, but it really takes the quarterback. If the quarterback is failing and 10 other guys are succeeding, it's not going to look good. Whereas if the quarterback is succeeding and a few other guys aren't in their necessarily best position, you can still make it work. So I think that's the key. The last thing I want to talk about is Cam Ward's off script ability and improvisational. That is in my opinion, his true superpower. And we just had Ted Wynn breaking down his superpower last episode, and he talked about his ability to win from inside the pocket and throw with anticipation and all those things being his superpower. But I think when you're talking superpower, you think of Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, these guys that do things that no one else in the league can do. And Cam Ward, he's not quite on the athleticism tier as Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. He's not quite on the arm talent tier as Patrick Mahomes, but he can make plays in a similar way that those guys make plays. You don't design an offense to run off script. That would be called on script if it was designed, right? So how do you take advantage of his ability to win in these situations? You need players that can be scramble drill demons, that can get on the same page as Cam Ward when he's rolling outside the pocket. One thing that's interesting, he's better throwing on the run to his left than he is throwing on the run to his right, like just by percentages, which doesn't make a lot of sense for a right-handed quarterback. But you need receivers who know that when he starts moving to his left, he's probably coming, like that ball's coming across the middle of the field to you or in that direction, but to the sideline or whatever. If he's rolling right, he might spin back to his left because he's more comfortable moving in that direction. So you can't design an offense around that ability, but you can design a roster around that ability. And I think the best way to do that would be to do everything in your power to get Xavier Restrepo on this Titans roster in the 4th round at one of those 2 4th-round picks you have, especially after Restrepo ran a 4.8 at Miami's Pro Day, that he might be on the board with that 1st or 2nd pick in the 4th round. And then the best way, you want it to feel like year 2 at Miami, if we're going back to the Brian Callahan year 3 at LSU comparison to Joe Burrow, you want it to feel like year 2 at Miami, bring in somebody that he had at Miami.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to take a totally different approach from you because you've already said it, but not just, roster personnel. How about this? It's going to sound cheesy, but it's true. You know how you said, like you said, you can't build an offense around it, but you know what you can do? Embrace it, right? Like when he makes a mistake, for example, you don't lose your mind and you don't warn him not to do that, right? It's about embracing the off-script ability, because if you empower it, he's going to feel more comfortable when the bullets are flying, right? He's not going to have to second guess and say, oh, coach, gave me an earful last time I tried this and it didn't work out. And I think Brian Callahan will do that. I think he will embrace that talent.
And you do have to wonder if he will, because we saw him lose his cool a couple times with Will Levis, but I think a different situation, a different player, first of all. And Will Levis, when he was working out of structure, it was almost always a bad play. It wasn't like almost always a good play with the occasional bad play like it is with Cam Ward. It was like, just get rid of the ball, Will. We don't need a turnover here. And
again, he lost that trust so early, right? In week 1 and week 2. He lost that first game, right? So different story.
So I think I mean, any other thoughts here? I think that there is a very clear path for how the Titans can integrate Cam Ward into their building and their organization and make him comfortable and build an offense around what he does well. And I think that process is starting. And that's why Callahan has already gone back and looked at those meetings with Joe Burrow. And that's why they're going to do more virtual meetings with Cam Ward between now and the draft. They're going to start working with him on this stuff, not blatantly, not outright in any way that tips what's going to happen, because the league needs their media machine to continue being a hype train for what's going to happen in the draft. Although the conversation will probably start shifting to what do the Browns do now that we are getting closer and closer. But that process is going to begin right away because they are going to need him to play. There's another thing that Callahan talked about, interesting in his interview with Kevin Clark, was the difference between a player who comes in as a number 1, number 2, whatever pick, and starts right away at quarterback, and a player who's able to sit behind somebody. He specifically mentioned that Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, he went all the way back to Aaron Rodgers, were in much different situations than most teams who acquire a high pick quarterback, because they were good teams that were expecting to continue winning, coming off playoff appearances. They didn't have the luxury to say, okay, let's throw this quarterback in and we'll take our lumps with him as a rookie, because you have the rest of the team that just made the playoffs. They're expecting to get better from where they were the season before. I don't think that because Mike Borgonzi was with Patrick Mahomes and watched him have success after sitting for a year, and because Chad Brinker was in Green Bay when Jordan Love sat and he's had success, I don't think that's going to influence what they do. Brian Callahan was in Cincinnati when Joe Burrow started right away, and they didn't have win-loss success his rookie season. Joe Burrow tore his ACL, but they had success with the player. He looked like the guy almost immediately. And I think that the Titans are going to be looking for something similar. I think Cam Ward will be expected to play right away, which is why it's even more important that they get him as comfortable as possible, as early as possible.
Well, they're not going to have a quarterback on the roster that can play in week 1, week 2, right? And about like the Mahomes thing, the Chiefs traded up from like 27, I think it was, to number 10, right? Or whatever. Like when you're picking at 27, you had a good year the year before. You got a good football team. And they had a much better veteran quarterback in Alex Smith than what the Titans have now. And of course, with Aaron Rodgers, that was a situation where he slid way further than he should have. And the Packers pounced at whatever it was, 24 overall. Again, 2 teams picking in the mid to late 20s. One of them had a Hall of Fame quarterback on the team still in Brett Favre, and the other one had a good veteran quarterback in Alex Smith, a team that had just gone to the playoffs the year before. Totally different situations.
So, all right, that'll do it for our conversation here. And Justin, right before we go, I'm drinking to Cam Ward being more or less as confirmed as it'll get, 100%. Bet the house on it, as you said, the pick. I'm drinking to that all day because you know me. I've been talking about this for months now about how much I wanted the Titans to take Cam Ward, and I'm drinking to the fact that it's finally happening. I'll drink to that, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages, the premier wine, spirits, and beer store in East Nashville. Check out the website linked in the description here to join the in crowd for exclusive perks at Sinkers Beverages. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Justin, I was looking at our numbers. The majority of our viewers per video are not subscribed versus subscribed. So what are you doing? You're here, you're watching, hit subscribe, help us grow, help the channel succeed. If you like our content, remember to like the video and drop a comment below. How do you think Cam Ward fits in to the Titans offense? Or better yet, how can the Titans fit their offense to Cam Ward? Any final thoughts, Justin?
No, I mean, I'd get ready to order the jersey, except I don't know what number he's wearing, right? It's probably not number 1, so you might have to hold off on that one a little bit.
His high school number was 7, so we're going to expect 7. All right, until next time, y'all stay safe out there and tighten up.
A Broadway sports media production.